This screencast will cover the WriteOn effect and blending modes. Let's get started. I am going to make sure I'm on After Effects here, and I will use the Shift Command S or Command Shift S or Control Shift S if you're on a PC to make a new project, and I will call that project. What are we doing here? Let's see. WriteOn. WriteOn. And I'll save that to the desktop. And I will import one of the files that I'll either supply for you on Canvas, or maybe you took it from class. Let's import a file, or Command I, and I'm going to import this Flourish Layers. I'll open it. I do not want it to be footage, I want it to be composition, and the footage dimension will be layer size, and I will go OK. And what I should have, as long as I don't import this as footage, then what I'll have is this Flourish Layers. If I double click that, if I open this, you'll see all the layers in Illustrator layers that we created, or I created before. And I'll go to this Flourish Layer composition, and I can right click on it or Command K and go to composition settings, and I just want to make sure I change that to white. It's also 5 seconds. I'm going to give myself a little more time. 10 period will give me 10 seconds, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now I've got a lot of layers here. I just want to show you a few ways to manage. You can click through these, and I'll kind of use the process of elimination to figure out where I need to be. I can also click and drag and turn those layers off. I think I can get down here. It looks like layer 4 is the one I'm after, so I will just click and drag all those, and that'll leave me one layer. There's still a lot of layers left here. If I would like to shy the layers, I can go over here to this little shy guy and click down through here, or click and drag, and then I can turn I can hide those layers with this little guy right here. Okay, so that looks pretty manageable. I want to start with an effect and preset. So if this isn't available, if you don't have it open, you can go to Window and just click Effects and Presets, and it should put it right here. The one we're looking for, because there are a lot, will be the WriteOn effect. And I can just start typing in write, like writing, and I'll find with just WRI, I'll find this WriteOn effect, and I can just take this and drag it onto my layer, my Flourish 4, my layer 10, and that's going to pop up all of these controls. So in order to set up a brush, right now the brush is defaulted to white. I want to change that to a bright color, maybe one you wouldn't normally use, but just make sure it's bright, it stands out. This is your brush size. It was set at 2 pixels. That's really hard to see, so I'm just going to drag that out until it's big enough for me to see. This is brush hardness. I'm going to go ahead and make that 100% hard. Now if I try to drag this around now, because it's right on my anchor, it might drag this layer around. I can try it. Oh, actually it worked. So I'm going to Command Z that. If that doesn't work, or you're having problems with that, you can always go over here to brush position, and you can move this around. That's your x-axis. This is your y-axis. Just get it someplace where you can drag it, and put it down at the base of this growy vine thing. Okay, so in order to start animating, you're going to need to set up keyframes. I like to view this down here. You can work up here, but I like this palette. If I open it, it's the same palette. But down here, it will show me my keyframes right here, and I kind of like to work that way. If you have time, if you have space down here, definitely do it. That's just the way I like to work. So I can set up my first keyframe with brush position. I'll move down a little ways. By brush position, I'll set, and it made a keyframe. And how I know it's working is if I drag down a little ways, I should be able to move this up. It looks also like I truncated at 5 seconds, which is fine for now. I'll show you after we kind of animate this how to get this timeline back, because I'll also show you, because it's done this, it will kind of default end at 5 seconds. So we'll fix that later. So I can go down the timeline. I can just kind of keep going down, keep dragging. If this was a straight line, it'd be super easy, but it's curved, so I have to use a brush. I'll just keep moving down the timeline and painting. And I'm going to be quick about this, but you can get into super fine details in exposing these leaves. If I go down here and kind of do that leaf, and then go down here, I'll do small spaces. I'll hover right there, do a very small incremental leaf cover, and back, and then, so this is not traveling very far, but I'll show you what it does here at the end. If I go like really close down here, I can move this this way a little bit more. I'll cover this leaf. Then the last leaf, I'll move down a little ways and make the last leaf pop out. Okay, so I have this all painted. What does that mean? I mean, that's fine and everything, but what I really want is it to show this thing kind of growing. So I'll go to this paint style, and instead of on original image, I will click reveal original image. And what it does is something like this. Okay? And maybe that was a little too long, so I'll just move that down and look at it again. That looks pretty good. Okay, so let's close this, and I'll unshy all my layers. And if I select all my layers, I can take this truncated timeline and move it all the way down to 10 seconds. Now the issue is just finding the other flourish that I want. And so I'll click on these until I find, oh, that's the one right there. So I found the one I want, and the reason I want this one is because I want it to, I want to show you that you can change the size of a brush. And I was having a hard time with this in class just because I don't think I was moving the brush in quite the right way to set it up so that it could grow. Anyway, let's take a look at it. I'm going to drag my WriteOn effect, this is repetition, back onto Flourish 2. Right? Does the same thing, I get the same results. I change this to a brighter color, say a bright red. I change the brush size so that I can see it, that's about 10. Change the hardness to 100. I will move this position down in the X and Y coordinate, so that's the Y coordinate. I'll move this to the beginning of this flourish layer. And I think I'd like to start the animation of this layer after this has had a little chance to kind of grow a little bit. So again, I'll open up this effects WriteOn, and that's going to give me everything I did up here, just so I can see when I start changing position here, I can start to see my keyframes. And hopefully you remember that the U key will expose the keyframes that I have on the other layer that's up there that I know I put keyframes on. So I'll kind of do the same motion. I'll go down this timeline a little bit, and I'll move. Oops, I moved the wrong thing. If I'm having a hard time grabbing this brush, I can always move the coordinates in brush position, say up a little bit, so I know I can grab it, and then I can move down. So it's got a nice little handle right there. I can move it down a ways. I can keep going. Now, you can always come back to these keyframes and smooth it out a bit. Just going to move down. This may not be the neatest job in the world, but just trying to give you an idea of what you can do. So about there, I'm going to need to start thinking about increasing this brush's size. Okay, so I do that up here in this brush time properties. I want to go size, right? So I want to be able to make the size bigger. If I just started dragging the brush size around without this brush time properties, say if I if I keyframed brush size and went down a ways and dragged this forward and made the brush size grow, what had happened is the whole thing would grow, and I don't want that. So I'm going to Command Z back a little ways, all the way back to there. I need to go to brush time properties and go size, and then what you'll find is if I come down here a ways, I should be able to go to the brush size and increase the brush size. Oop. Hold on a second. Oh, I need to put in, first I need to put in a keyframe on brush size, so that's that'll keep it the same size. If I move down the timeline and start to make this bigger, let's move down a little bit more. There we go. So that's the thing I wasn't doing, is I wasn't pulling the brush along in class, and so you kind of need to start moving the brush in order to make this brush time properties thing work. As long as you're moving the brush, I can keep as long as you're moving that brush along, I should be able to keep growing the brush. But I need to move it, and then I need to go brush size gets bigger. And it looks like I missed this down here, so I'm going to just kind of J key back to where it's about there. Actually, if I change this, should grow the whole thing enough, because this was my start point. Hopefully this is making sense. And I'll K key down. Looks like I'm covered pretty well. I'll move down the timeline, I'll move the brush a little ways. At the same time, I'll increase the brush size. So brush size comes up a bit more. See how as I move along, I can change both the position of the brush and the size of the brush. I kind of have to do it in tandem. Right, so I can go back to size, make that a little bigger. I think that looks pretty good. Keep dragging it. And now I'll go ahead and make the brush smaller. So I dragged it there. I can go to brush size. Oh, I have to be careful here. So it went to there. Drag a little further. I'll over drag a little bit. And I'll start to make the brush size a little smaller. So it needs to have some momentum to do that. And then even a little smaller. It looks like it should be able to drag around. Now I really want this brush size to get smaller, so I'll reduce it and drag and reduce some more. And drag. And that should do it. That's a little clumsy, but I think you'll see that I can increase this brush size as I go. There's one little spot here. I'm going to go K key. Just going to drag the brush over to cover that little speck right there. And I think that'll work all the way around. And now if I go to paint style on to instead of original image, go to reveal original image, and let's see what I come up with. Well, it could be a little neater, and I think what I'll do is I'll bring these down, hold the Option key down, and kind of squish those a little bit. And that'll kind of speed up that end point. Yeah. Not the neatest in the world, but when you see how we're going to use this thing, and I'd encourage you to do all of the flourish layers if you want to use this flourish in your art piece for next week. Let's go ahead and I'll go back to project. Let's create a new composition. I'll call it asterisk asterisk main, and I'll leave everything pretty much the way it is except for the preset. And I want you to remember the preset is what is it? HD, HDTV, HDV, HDTV, 720. That's 30 frame a second setting, or 29.97, and I think that's good. I'll hit OK. So now I've got this new main composition, and what I can do is I can import. I can go Command I, or I can go File, Import File, and find this urban landscape JPEG, and I'll just open that. It's a little bit small, so I can increase the size of that in the scale, make it a little bigger than what I need, and I'll move it, let's see, so let's make it quite a bit bigger, so I can really get a little bit of distance. So what I'm going to do is going to move the position. So I'm just going to start the position there. I'm going to go all the way to the end of my timeline, and I'm going to end that there, holding down the Shift key. Should make it go straight. So that's just kind of an artificial pan across a little bit different. So that's set up. What I can do is make my flourish kind of interact with this. If I go down a ways, you'll see my flourish is growing. This is the pre-comp. And I can go to the pre-comp and go to transform, and I can scale that up a bit. we'll get into making this retain its vectors later. There are some tricks to that. I can rotate it to make it kind of come on, and maybe I'll scale it a bit more so that it really looks like it's doing something. And then as my city pans across, I have this growing vine thing happen. Okay, so you can barely see that, and I want you to take a look. I'm going to use a track matte, and I'm going to use a solid layer, and right now I'm going to go ahead and I'll use the U key again to show that I have a position change there. That's the only keyframes I have is just this background position kind of scrolling across. What I want to do is create a new layer, solid. So that's layer, solid. I will make this blue and hit OK. Now I've got a big blue solid right there. I'm going to put that solid underneath my flourish layer. So if you see the flourish layer go, it's actually growing on top of that blue layer. I'm going to make that flourish layer a track matte. And you can make a track matte out of just about anything. I'm going to hit track matte, and I'm going to affect this royal blue solid. And if I make that alpha matte, what should happen is that that track matte will actually turn my my black graphic blue. I can also use a blending mode. I'll make another solid, new solid. I'll click here. I'll make this kind of a red color. That's a little pink. Here, that looks good. Okay, so that's kind of a red color. So I've got blue, flourish, red color. I'll hit OK. I want to show you these. These are much like the blending modes that we have in Photoshop and even Illustrator and a few other Adobe products. But it does some cool things. I can go overlay. Let's make sure we do this down here. That makes it look a certain kind of way. I would play with these. I mean, there's lighten. That's interesting. I'm going to use difference. That's really pretty interesting. So I think I'll stay with difference. That makes for an interesting cityscape. But you can experiment for sure. There are all kinds of these that you can play around with. Multiply makes it very, now it's doing other things to this. I could even take this solid and move it down under there, and then that way this will be bright blue, but the cityscape will still be tinted. I could go ahead and look at, see what maybe divide does. That's interesting, but again it kind of used the opposite of blue on the color wheel, so it's not quite as it doesn't stand out quite as much. So anyway, I want you to experiment with these. Vivid light might be a little too much. I think difference is probably the most interesting. So let's just go with that. Okay, so let's take a quick look at collecting this for output or packaging it, basically, where you want to save all your files before you render it out, or save all your files so you can move it to a different computer. And I kind of promised that I would show this. So how that works is I go to Dependencies, and I go to Collect Files. And it's going to say you need to save this before you can do that. And I'll hit Save. and I'll repeat that notice. And it's just going to say, okay, what do you want to do? I'll collect all source files. I don't necessarily need to generate a report. And it says reveal collected project in Finder when finished. That's fine. I can go ahead and collect. And it's basically going to say, do you want to make a folder? And I'll say sure. And I'll just call it WriteOn on the desktop. And when I hit save, it just saves it all into this new folder, right? I'll close that. Saves it all into this new folder, and then I can take that folder with me, and I can bring it anywhere, and it won't break the links, and it won't make the little rainbow missing files thing. It'll also collect MP3s or sound files in general. It'll also collect video files. So everything that you need to collect, it will collect in this. So that is, once again, that's Finder. Once again, that's File, Dependencies, Collect Files. Okay, that was a lot. Hopefully you get this. You can rewind it if I go too fast. And thank you. See you next time.